Hello again. I want to talk to you about estrogen, or estrogen if you're American. I'm going to call it estrogen. I'm going to be very British. What was it Winston Churchill said? He said, two nations divided by a common language. Okay. If you go to your doctor, oncologist, nurse, and say, what is estrogen? I'll put money down, you get the reaction, it's the female sex hormone. Well, it's not strictly true. Estrogen is a family of chemicals in competition with each other for receptor sites in your body. It's a family of chemicals. There's lots of different estrogens, and have got different strengths. And you have three particular areas of estrogen. You have human estrogen, you have chemical estrogen or xenoestrogen, and you have phytoestrogens, which are plant estrogens. These are your friends. Now, human estrogen, typically, if you are under the age of 50, you make hormones, estrogens in your ovaries. And you typically make estrone with some estradiol and some estriol. And if anything's the female sex hormone, it's estrone. And what happens when you go to menopause or go through menopause is your total estrogen in your ovaries falls by about 65%. Let's say you go down from 100 down to 35, enough to stop you ovulating. So you still make estrone, you still make some estradiol, you still make some estriol. But the bulk of estradiol is actually made in your fat stores by aromatase enzymes. And while estrone may be the female sex hormone, estradiol is this thing that's much, much stronger. It's the bad guy. And they used to think it was made from testosterone. No, it's not. It's actually made from your fat stores by aromatase enzymes. You actually make 5 to 10% in your adrenals as well. And what estradiol does is when it sits on the receptors for estrone and estrogen on your cells, it creates chaos inside the cell. So it actually blocks the pump on the outside of the cells, a pump that's driven by magnesium. And this pump ordinarily pushes potassium into your cells and kicks sodium out. And all your cellular mitochondrial reactions run on potassium. And when estradiol blocks the pump, yes, more sodium fills into the cell and your mitochondria can run on sodium. But what happens is the sodium salts that are produced are much more acidic than potassium ones. And so the cell starts to get poisoned slightly. It becomes more acidic. It sucks in less oxygen. It actually sucks in less carbohydrate. It produces less energy. It makes more sodium salts. And so it's actually powering down all the time. And that's what happens, chaos. So it's estradiol that causes the chaos. And there's no evidence whatsoever that estrone, which is about 40 times weaker, actually causes such chaos. Certainly not for estriol either. So estradiol is the bad guy. Then you can get chemical estrogens. Chemical estrogens are xenoestrogens, and the worst group are herbicides. You find them in herbicides. And herbicides, for example, DDT and lindane were found in Israel. So they were getting into the grass, they were getting into the cows, they were getting into the milk, they were getting into women's breasts, and women in Israel were getting 4 times the breast cancer from herbicides. So DDT and lindane got banned in the West. Well, they didn't actually. What we do is we still make them, and we send DDT and lindane to places like Kenya and Thailand. So look where your green beans come from when you shop in the supermarket. So it's still in the food chain. Then it's pesticides, quite a way behind. And finally, although it's talked about a lot, you get xenoestrogens, chemical estrogens, in your toiletries bag. So typically in nail polish, you can get toluene, which acts as a xenoestrogen. Never put spray perfume on your skin, because perfume can contain 15 xenoestrogens. And typically one of the worst things is actually sun creams, because sun creams can actually contain oxybenzone, which is a known xenoestrogen. And sun creams can actually, of course, contain perfume, which has got xenoestrogens. And people typically leave their plastic bottle on the beach in the sun, and then the sun denatures the plasticizers in the plastic into plasticizers, and that gets into the cream, and you rub that on every hour and so on. Okay, so bad problem. And so that's xenoestrogens. The worst of the xenoestrogens act like estradiol and create chaos inside cells. That's what happens. Finally, you have phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens are your friends. And so typically phytoestrogens include greens and beans. You actually can eat a rainbow diet, but in the rainbow diet, you should be majoring on lots of greens, lots of pulses, legumes like lentils, chickpeas, and so on, because these things give you phytoestrogens. I'll come back to it. So let's talk about estradiol for a moment. So what actually happens is your estradiol, as I said, causes chaos inside the cell. And if you've got estrogen-driven breast cancer or womb cancer, or, for example, some ovarian cancers, you might be given, especially for estrogen-driven breast cancer, an aromatase inhibitor. So this will block the aromatase enzyme, which is making estradiol. Now, if you go on the internet, you will see that aromatase inhibitors like anastrozole, letrozole actually can block 98% of estrogen. This is rubbish. Now, at one of my shows a few years back, I was actually asked, how effective is tamoxifen? The answer is 3 to 5%. One lady in the front of the audience said, I was told by the Royal Marsden tamoxifen was 9% effective. And another lady said, I was told 1%. And one lady said, well, I was at the Royal Marsden too, and they told me 9%. But actually, when I couldn't take it anymore, the nurse said it was only 1%. So then I got asked, how effective is anastrozole and letrozole? And I said 13 to 15%. Well, if you watch my show with Professor Robert Thomas, who's Professor at Addenbrooke's of breast cancer and prostate cancer, he said I got that wrong. He said that letrozole, which is the stronger of the two, is only effective at 9 to 11%. So there's a huge discrepancy between being 9 to 11% effective and cutting your estrogen by 98%. You'll also be told that if you take anastrozole, for example, or letrozole, this actually blocks your estrogen. You're far, far more likely to get brittle bones. So you need bisphosphonates and a chunk of calcium with a little bit of vitamin D in it. Well, in order to check this out, I went to the website American Bone Health, which is largely an American government site, and it doesn't say that at all. What it says is if you want good bone health, you need vitamin D, you need magnesium, you need phosphorus, you need other things like boron, and you do need some calcium, which you can get 1,500 milligrams a day. But you need actually quite high levels of vitamin D a day, 2,500. You need 300 to 500 milligrams of magnesium and 2 helpings of lentils a week for your phosphorus. So that's how to have decent bones. So what is actually going on with letrozole and anastrozole? The answer is they don't take out all your estrogen at all. In fact, we have a program, and I'm going to come to it at the end of this chat, where we take out a lot more estrogen from your system than letrozole and anastrozole. And I don't recall anybody in the last 21 years actually having osteoporosis because they were on my program. What actually happens is estradiol, blocked by letrozole or anastrozole, actually is reduced by nothing like 98%. And letrozole and anastrozole and bisphosphonates, and there's research on this, all contain something that blocks your osteoclasts. So when it comes to your bones, every minute of the day, your bones are being weakened, and osteoclasts then jump in and break down the brittle bone and provide the raw materials to your osteoblasts, and your osteoblasts remake the bone. So you get strong bones again. Well, there's some evidence that anastrozole, letrozole, and indeed bisphosphonates can actually block the osteoclasts. So you can't get rid of the brittle bone. And there is one research report, which was done after only a year. You probably know you can run the risk of osteoporosis after 5 years of these drugs. But there's one research report done after a year, which is a waste of time. But in that, it said there was no osteoporosis, but it did actually say there was some evidence that the markers were already changing. Right, so that's the background to that. So that's what estradiol does, and that's how officialdom says you should reduce it. Now let's talk about what we can actually do. Well, when we come down to phytoestrogens, there are a number of things you should know. So quite a number of years ago, a well-known professor at the Royal Marsden and I were talking, and he said to me, I've got genistein working. Genistein is a phytoestrogen. It's in soy, it's in red clover. And when I said to him, what do you mean by working? He said, genistein is actually sitting on receptor sites and blocking nasty estradiol from sitting there. It doesn't affect chemical estrogens, xenoestrogens, but it does affect human estrogen. So genistein can block estradiol from doing its chaos creating. The problem with phytoestrogens is you need to eat them regularly. You need to eat them every day because they hold on less tightly and they wash through the body faster. So you tend to have to eat the pulses and the greens and beans every day. But you could take soy for genistein. You could actually take the herb of Hippocrates, red clover, as well. And it's not just this professor at the Royal Marsden who was doing the work, but we know from Dr. Young S. Kim, who is head of cancer and nutrition at the National Cancer Institute, that genistein is a very powerful cancer stem cell killer. So she has it in her 8 natural compounds that can prevent cancer recurrence. So genistein is a pretty important compound. So what we tend to do is we tend to, as I said, focus you on a rainbow diet with lots of greens and beans in it, lots of phytoestrogens. But the second thing you can take is something called indole-3-carbinol. Now, indole-3-carbinol is produced when you bite into broccoli. So you eat broccoli, after about 5 or 6 seconds, you actually make indole-3-carbinol. And then that breaks down further into 4 substrates, one of which is DIM, and a lot of people talk about DIM. When it comes to estrogen breast cancer, I would always use indole-3-carbinol. I would use DIM because it affects the P27 pathway. I would use DIM more for triple negative breast cancer. So indole-3-carbinol is known to denature nasty estradiol, and it's known to change the receptor sites. So estradiol has more of a problem sitting on them. You can actually take indole-3, or we like you to do green juices. So kale, broccoli, celery, cucumber, maybe buy some green powder that's got chlorella and wheatgrass, and a little bit of sea kelp, because a lot of women who've got breast cancer are slightly low in iodine, so sea kelp's got that in it. And then we suggest you make this natural juice up, and you actually make the powder with water up, and you put the two together, and you add a little bit of beetroot and a little bit of carrot. Not too much. Never put fruit in a juice. For example, if you throw a few handsful of berries into a blender, you'll end up with 100 mils of berry smoothie. and that will give you 10.3 grams of sugar, while a Coca-Cola gives you 10.6 to 10.9 grams of sugar. Cancer doesn't mind where it gets its sugar from. So what we're doing is giving you a little bit of beetroot, a little bit of carrot. Again, carrot's very sweet, but also in your juice, we would put a big chunk of raw ginger, because raw ginger is very anti-inflammatory, anti-sugar, anti-fats, and so on. And it's very good overall as an anti-cancer agent. It also will mask the taste of your green juices. So masking the taste is probably quite important. So what you've got then is you've got green juices with lots of kale, lots of broccoli, i.e. lots of indole-3 carbonyl. Rob Thomas, actually at one point with prostate cancer patients, was getting them to do broccoli juice in the morning and broccoli soup at lunchtime. That's what it does, blocks estradiol. Now, then we come to a third thing you can have, which is melatonin. Now, go elsewhere on my site, you will see a full review of what melatonin does. You make melatonin in your pineal gland at nighttime. You make melatonin by day in your mitochondria. Melatonin is known to regulate human estrogen, and it's known to regulate growth hormone, both players in an estrogenic cancer. So melatonin is really good for you, and you can actually make it yourself by ensuring you actually have enough raw ingredients like tryptophan or 5-HTP, and you want to be making serotonin by day, which means you've got to have lots of good gut bacteria. Alternatively, you can go and get hold of melatonin, and as I say in the melatonin show, that I'm not entirely convinced that you need to take 20 milligram or 60 milligrams 3 times a day. I think that the research is very limited on its ability to kill cancers off. And I think that what you should do, like glutathione and green juices, you should actually make melatonin. So you need to make sure you've got a healthy gut and you're actually going out in the sunlight during the day. It doesn't matter if it's black clouds overhead, and you need to refrain from using blue light before you go to sleep. You need red light and so on. So it's all there to put your computers and your phones on night shift. So melatonin is very, very important. Melatonin actually is anti-human estrogen. It's anti-growth hormone. It's the biggest antioxidant we make. It's very, very, very anti-inflammatory. It has 5 actions against cancer cells, and it also cleans your cells up. That's what it does. So it regulates human estrogen, but not the chemical ones. It also has 5 actions against cancer cells that we know of, and it actually changes the receptor sites on your cells. So estradiol can't sit there. Then there's something called myomin. Myomin was put together by an oncologist at Northwestern. He was an oncologist for breast cancer, and he got fed up with women coming to him saying, I'm on anastrozole, I'm on letrozole, it's giving me hot flushes, it's giving me bone pains. What's the alternative? And the answer is there was none. So about 20 years ago, being half Chinese, he put together 5 Chinese herbs. And myomin, I've checked it, 2 herbs are excellent for cutting estrogen, 2 herbs are very good. 1 I can't find any research on, but I'm not Chinese. Maybe that's the reason. So there's myomin. And finally, we've made a show with Judy Evans. You should go and watch it. Judy Evans is the natural progesterone queen in Britain, and she's been doing natural progesterone for something like 30 years. And natural progesterone will balance your estrogen. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about, number 1, you doing green juices, because that will give you lots of kale, broccoli, indole-3 carbonyl, and DIM. And what we're also talking about is you not having fat stores. So I've got a lady in America who hired a personal trainer just to make sure they all came down and did the green juices. And then you need to look at your herbicides and pesticides and clean your act up, and especially in your toiletries bag. And then you can focus on a rainbow diet with lots of greens and beans in it. and my lady in America actually was taking red clover. Then you can do indole-3 carbinol if you don't think you're going to do green juices. She did both indole-3 and she did green juices. And then she did melatonin and then she did myomin. I think it's overkill, but she beat her estrogen driven breast cancer. So who am I to tell you otherwise? So we would suggest that you did green juices. We would suggest that you did an estrogen dampening rainbow diet with lots of greens and beans in it. So that's your phytoestrogens. So all the time we're focused on blocking estradiol. Yeah, you could do indole-3, but if you're doing the green juices, you don't need to. You could do melatonin, you could do myomin. I think I would do one. I might actually seriously look at natural progesterone. But that's the way to cut your estrogen. And men with prostate cancer ought to be looking at that too, not just women with womb cancer or breast cancer or ovarian cancer if they've been told they're estrogen positive. So that's a little package of how you get rid of nasty old estradiol naturally by eating your way through it. Okay, so I hope that's clear to you, and I look forward to making another one of these videos for you.